It was agonisingly close, and very disappointing that council and ministers decided to vote en bloc to oppose a committee.
It was more than just the Council of Ministers en bloc, though, wasn't it? Because you had three others, Robert Shaw, Morehouse and Peake, who also voted against.
There were, and it couldn't be closer at 10 against 11, but all of the Legislative Council were in favour. And I think listening to the debate, the very compassionate humanitarian comments that came out of the debate, and including the Bishop's contribution, it was very clear that there was a lot of sympathy. Mrs. Beecroft even saying that she had offered her house as accommodation should Syrian refugees come to the Isle of Man. This wasn't actually about bringing Syrian refugees to the Isle of Man, as I made very clear in my opening speech. This was clearly about scrutinising a government decision or a Comin decision that said the best way the Isle of Man can help is to continue sending them money. And they say that we have pledged or spent £1.5 million helping 30,000 refugees. I'm saying, would we not be better spending that amount of money on the island, supporting and assisting a handful of families who are in the very vulnerable resettlement scheme that the UN has identified, a number of people, families who cannot, for whatever political or other reason, return to Syria. They are the ones in this small number of refugees that are in the resettlement programme. The UK has pledged to take 20,000. The Isle of Man, in proportion to that, we would take 25 people.
Do you think there's a lot of misinformation being put about?
Oh, completely, yeah. There were so many examples cited that were not relevant to this particular argument. And aside from that, push back on the shouldn't we take refugees. This was about examining the evidence that was the basis for the government decision to pay funding, to contribute cash towards the refugee camps out in Lebanon and Iraq or Turkey, wherever they are. This wasn't about bringing refugees to the Isle of Man. This was saying, well, shall we look at it from a position of what we could do, what is the best for the refugees, what is the best way for the Isle of Man to rise up and meet its international obligations. In one of its written answers, the Chief Minister said that the UK is responsible for the Isle of Man's international obligations. Well, I don't agree. The Isle of Man, we may not be a sovereign state, but the Isle of Man has for many generations stood up and contributed and met its international obligations. Why wouldn't we, in this case, do an international appeal for a particular very vulnerable group? And we're not talking anything that we would be able to take refugees that we wouldn't have the medical or other facilities to support. But if as Mr. Shimon cited, the Isle of Bute, other Scottish islands, parts of Cumbria and the north of England taking massively more in proportion to the south of England, why would the Isle of Man not have the same resources and facilities to support? This committee was to look at what is the possible and examine the evidence. If Council of Ministers and the Chief Minister were so confident in their argument that they had all the correct evidence that their decision was based on, why wouldn't they welcome the scrutiny? Very likely then the committee could have come back and said, yes, you're absolutely right, the funding is the best method.
We haven't seen that evidence.
We haven't seen that. I think Mr. Crageen promised that information would be disseminated. I have to wait for Hansard to see who said what exactly, but I think there was a comment that the information would be disseminated to support that, which would be very welcome.